Hi, welcome to the Liberty Bell Saturday Night Special. We're excited to open this month's special to everyone attending. Thank you so much, everyone, for signing up.
And I'm Lynn Taylor, the other half of the Liberty Bells, also known as the Common Core Diva. And we do have special guest commentators for you, all lined up. Lots of evidence tonight to present, as well as solutions. It's a jam packed webinar. So, Suzanne's going to monitor the questions for us in the chat room. And so we ask that you make sure you keep her busy. And we also encourage comments tonight as well. Just the only thing that we ask is that you keep it relevant to our topic tonight.
Yes, we'll be showing you evidence of the union between the two major political parties this evening. That said, we are presenting this to you so that whatever political divisions school choice will continue to breed, you can effectively present facts, not opinion. Finger pointing to one particular political side of the aisle is not a solution.
Now, we recognize that we are first Christians and secondly Americans. So our political parties will need to be checked at the door for this evening. Everyone attending this evening will be receiving an archive copy of the webinar. And we encourage you, rewatch this webinar, go over the information, share it with other like-minded warriors as well. And if you feel uncomfortable sharing, Suzanne and I have a wonderful workshop ready and on this topic that we would love to present to your groups. But more about that later. Right now, we're going to let Suzanne introduce our guest commentators. Suzanne?
Alrighty, so you know me and Lynn, we're the Liberty Bells. We have with us Tim Brown, who is the senior editor for Sons of Liberty Media, and he does the Sons of Liberty Media radio show every morning, Monday through Friday at 6 a.m. and on Saturdays at 8 a.m. Tim, give us a quick hello.
Hello.
Hello. And
Hello,
I'm just
Tim.
going to add real quick, he is my cohort on every Wednesday morning for the past at least 2, 3 years.
Yes,
So
Yes.
yeah,
right into the core
that's
Wednesday.
right.
And we also have with us David Zuniga, who is the founder of Tactical Civics. Give us a big hello, David.
Hi, how are you?
Yay! Thank you so much. And we also have the co founder of Tactical Civics with us, and that is Matt Maida. Say hello, Matt, please.
Good evening. Happy to be here.
Oh, thank
Yay!
you.
All right, thank you so much. Now we have a few little quick housekeeping items because we this is a 2 hour presentation, so we've got a lot of information, so we want to try to get everything in. So we're going to ask that co-hosts make comments, questions, and answers as concise as possible. We're going to try to do the same. Uh, Participants should keep to the subject matter, whether that's in chat or otherwise. Only the hosts and co-hosts will be using microphones and camera and other applications as we determine. If you are not a co-host, we just ask that you conduct yourselves appropriately. We're all adults. We know how to do that. And I'll be moderating as well as controlling the presentation. So I've got a lot of vegetables on my plate. So just please be patient because this is a large group with multiple co-hosts, so it does require some extensive management. If you have questions, please use the raise hand emoji so that I can see it. I've got chat up and I can see that. And whoever your question is intended for, please put their name after the raise hand emoji and then ask your question so that I can direct it to the appropriate individual. And all participants, co-hosts, hosts, and anyone in chat will receive via email a link for the video presentation of this webinar, as well as links for the nice goodies provided to us by David Zuniga from Tactical Civics, and that will be the Tactical Civics pamphlet and a book, and we will show you that near the end of the show, and you will all get a link to get that. Um, so also you will receive an email link to all the co-host websites and platforms. That way you can access their material. And I ask that you allow about 7 days for that to happen because it takes me a while to get it all together.
All right,
All
very
right.
good. Well, as Suzanne said, we anticipate our time to be about 2 hours tonight. So make sure you grab a notebook, something to write with. If you need something to drink, get a comfy spot. Let's dive in to what our presentation is tonight. And that is So You Think You Know, School Choice.
And I'm going to go ahead and share the screen, and we are going to start with um, our presentation for school choice. So you think you know school choice. Bradley could not make it tonight, unfortunately, and neither could James Martinez. But James is going to be giving us another day where he can put in his opinion because he is our mind control and mind manipulation expert. So he will have the links as well so that he can review the material and then provide us with his expert opinion. So,
Right. And
Lynn, I'm going to let you go ahead and start, and
okay,
you just let
very
me know
good.
when you are ready to change
Okay,
slides.
very good. I just want to point out Jake will be listening in as he
Yes.
can tonight. He has been blessed to have been given a lot of Charlotte Iserbeat's files. And it is the reason we're even doing this presentation tonight is to carry on one of the last projects that she had started, and that was to expose how school choice can be tied to not only eroding the Constitution, but also taking away our First Amendment guarantee to representative government. So, with that said, let's go ahead and go to slide 2. Okay. And as you can see, this is all about, is it God or government? Now, we know with the roots that we have in America, it was all based on God, but we've seen that the government has come in, especially through the recent rash of school choice or parental rights bills, and said, no, we know better than you how to raise your family. So we need to remember that God is the one who gave us life, not our government. God is the one who gave us our children, not the government. It is God who made us parents, and we do not need state or federal legislation, policies, or a combination thereof saying what you can and cannot do with your family. We also know that we are the ones who are charged to be their chief nurturer and educator, not our government. But we've seen that our society has been so indoctrinated through mind control that we're consistently told we cannot possibly know how to educate our own children, but yet the government can absolutely do it. And if they can't do it, they're going to put money in between you and your family to be leverage. So we want to make sure that we know that the government under our Constitution was to secure and to protect those God-given rights, not replace them. And what we've seen happen, especially in education, is that our government has come in and become a de facto ruler. And with that, I'm going to ask if anyone has any comments on that.
I would like Tim, I know Tim can give us the biblical scripture on
Right.
parents teaching their children and not turning it over to government.
Yeah, that's one of the things, I guess every week I just remind people, this is one of the first commands here that God gives the people. He charges them in Deuteronomy 6. He says, "Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God is one Lord, and thou shalt love the Lord thy God with all thine heart, and with all thy soul, with all thy might. And these words which I command thee this day shall be in thine heart." So he talks to the parents and he says, you're to love me with everything that you are. And he says, you're to have the things that I commanded you in your heart. And then he says, and you shall teach them diligently unto thy children, and shall talk of them when thou sittest in thine house, and when thou walkest by the way, and when thou liest down, and when thou risest up. And thou shalt bind them for a sign upon thine head, or upon thine hand, and they shall be as frontlets between thine eyes. And thou shalt write them upon the post of thy house and on thy gates. And so he says later, he says the reason you do this is because so that when you come into the land and you get all these things that I provided for you, you won't forget that I'm the one who done it, who showed you love of bringing you out of slavery and bringing you into a land and setting you free. And so it's very important that, the buck stops here is with the parents. I've often asked, we see these parents standing up to these school boards now, which is this is one of the silver linings of some of this tyranny that's taken place, is that you're starting to see that some people are opening their eyes to what's going on, and they're going to interpose themselves, as which they should have done before, and which they should continue to do, by removing their kids from the public indoctrination centers we call public schools. But you're starting to see them awaken to that. The thing is, I hope they won't go back to sleep after they get a victory, because it takes several victories to win the day. But each victory gives you encouragement that you can do what the Bible says that you can do, and that we're called to be more than conquerors through Him who loved us, and that's the Lord Jesus. So the main way that we do that, you can see this all throughout Scripture, but especially in the Old Testament, is just the simple process of moms and dads teaching their kids and raising them to fear the Lord.
And that
Right.
is a good segue right into the next slide.
Sure is. It
Perfect.
sure is. Okay. And I alluded to this just a little bit ago when I said, that we've got multiple generations who've been told, as a parent, you're not the chief educator. So again, that's a direct slam against Scripture. But we've seen that when education became institutionalized, it was the go-to, school became the go-to for every type of learning. And parents started giving up their God-given right and responsibility to teach their children and just go put them in an institution. Now, it's really, really funny in a very sad way that a school has been called an institution, but it actually is an institution because it is not a loving home. Locally funded or funded by other means. And this happened about 1818. And you can find that in Sam Blumenfeld's book, The NEA, Trojan Horse in Education. Now, as we pointed out in our precursor for tonight, France was one of the examples for how this happened. Page 10 also in this particular book calls out the United States that, look, if you really want quality education, you will not find it in the public system. And where the thing is really hitting the road about parents, waking up to pull their kids out, where they're falling right back to sleep, where they're falling right back into harm's way, is with this school choice rhetoric that somehow government money given to your family to do what you want for education will be your savior, when the evidence we have and that we're presenting tonight shows the exact opposite will happen.
All right. Do you want to go into our little quiz, the true false question?
Yes, we have a quiz. So I want
Yes.
everyone to, if you're taking notes, I want everyone to get out your piece of paper. And we have 14 statements, and they're true and false. Okay. And we're going to see just how well you know school choice. Okay. So our first one is government education money is mine to do what I want with. Is that true or false? We know what the popular sales pitch is, and that is that, yes, it's absolutely yours. And yes, absolutely, you can do anything you want with it. Okay. So is that true or false, Suzanne?
Lynn, that would be a false statement.
And why is that?
It is false because the government has already decided what you are going to be able to use that money for. You don't get to choose. They've already chosen and decided for you, and they have actually put it into law.
Okay. And that would be through the Every Student Succeeds Act with its guise of school choice. And what they're not showing you is that the federal funding streams, whether it's through the Department of Health, the Department of Education, or the Department of Labor, they all meld into your school and into your community. And thus they have strings. Some are grants. And Tim and I have talked about how grants are just as laden with strings as, say, a loan is, or a subsidy, or anything like that. All right, our second one. Education is a federally constitution-based entity. And we all together say
False.
false, because it's not. Okay. But we have millions of people who think that it is, so much so they will die on a hill to have the Department of Education lay out all kinds of garbage for them. Okay. You have, and that includes a lot of our politicians. They have forgotten their constitutional responsibility and what our Constitution actually says. So, where is education supposed to be based as per the Constitution? And anybody can chime in on this one.
It should be with the people.
Should be with the people. That's
people.
right.
That's right. 10th
Absolutely.
Amendment.
That's
10th
right.
Amendment.
Okay. Now, our third statement, education is a state constitution based entity. And we can all say
That is
true.
a true statement.
That's true, because it was one of those things that was not assigned to the federal government. It was one of those that was reserved for the states. And as we have pointed out several times in several different broadcasts from several different people, you know, the founders did not go and label every single activity that needed to be left to the states. They thought, as rightly so, that the people would govern well enough that they wouldn't need to lay it out in black and white. But we have seen that our legislators, we have seen that those private-public partnerships have so muddied the waters that no one can tell what is supposed to be unless someone comes with a bill going, okay, here's what you can do, here's what you cannot do. Okay. All right. Parents, as U.S. citizens of both the state and the nation, are free to choose their child's education outlet.
Does anyone know the answer to this? Anybody can chime in.
You mean republic, not nation, right?
Right. Okay. Okay. Parents, as citizens of both the nation,
state.
the republic,
Right.
and the state, are free to choose their child's education outlet. No, this is false. And
Should be
here's
true.
why.
Should be
I'm
true,
sorry?
but it isn't.
It should be true, but it's
Should be
not.
true,
And
but
this
it is
is,
not.
and the reason why is because when the Every Student Succeeds Act came along with page 17, it said that all education had to be aligned to the same post-secondary readiness standards. That killed what we had as far as school choice. That absolutely killed it. And here we are, several years into that particular federal law, which is also unconstitutional, and people are still thinking they are free to choose the outlet. You can choose the outlet, but that's not going to change the funding. It won't change the curriculum, and it will not change the agenda. All right, let's move on. Okay. Education is by choice based on curriculum, resources, and testing. Suzanne, what is this one?
This one is false.
Okay. And again, we just said why it was, because the funding streams are aligning mainly the assessments. So whether you're in public education or you're in another supposed choice of education, those nationally normed assessments are going to be the Achilles heel. Okay. Very good. All right. Nationally aligned tests have nothing to do with my curriculum or resources. Well, we just answered that one, and it's false.
It's false.
It has everything to do with it. Now, buried in the Every Student Succeeds Act, after it stated that every education had to be aligned to the same thing, it went on to say that everyone who taught had to be credentialed to teach that, but it also said that your assessments had to be not only aligned with the previous assessments that you'd used, but it had to be regionally compatible with the other states around you that were taking the same assessments. And Suzanne, you have a little bit on that, don't you?
On what?
The regionalism, just real quickly.
Oh, regionalism. Yes.
Mhm.
This is where, and we talked about this when we did our show last Thursday. Regionalism is communism. And what the goal is to give us a China style type government where it's regional. It starts from the top down, but everything is controlled at a higher level. And what is appointed at the local level is exactly that. It's appointed, and you don't elect them. You don't have any say. They are beholden to whoever puts them in office, and it is not the people.
Right. Absolutely, absolutely. It's councils, and the USMCA put that into to 24/7, 365-day existence. It absolutely did. Okay, our next one. My tax money is still my own, even after I get it back from the state or the federal levels of government. This will include my school vouchers, tax credits, education savings accounts, grants, or some sort of incentive check. Because it's my money, I'm free.
Is that true or false? Anybody want to chime in and answer?
Okay,
Okay.
it is false. It is
Yep.
absolutely false because, and this is where it starts to get into how it's impacting your vote. Your taxes, the lion's share goes to what? Education. If we start eroding your voice through your vote and we still keep collecting taxes, we have now started to shift that you have representative government into appointed government. So this is where it starts to begin, is through your taxes. Okay.
And you do get taxation without proper representation as
You
well.
absolutely do, especially when your school boards are not doing what you, the people, you, the parents in that local area, deem necessary. All right, school choice in no way was wiped out by the Every Student Succeeds Act. Now, this was one that Betsy DeVos loved to throw around. Okay, she told you Common Core was dead. She told you that you had every opportunity to choose exactly what you wanted, and they were going to pad it with these education savings accounts. No, page 17 wiped it out when it said on page 17, all education, now this was not all public education, this was all education, must be aligned to the same post-secondary readiness standards as laid out by the Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act. Now, what people miss by that statement is all education, that includes daycare, pre-K, K through 12, post-secondary, because you looped in the Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act. By default, that pulls in the Higher Education Act, which pulls in your adult learners. So in other words, the cradle to grave, the lifelong learning that has been the global agenda was saddled upon every one of us. And it's being sold to us that somehow school choice will make me escape all that, when it truly will not. And we'll continue to lay this out for everyone. So let's move to the next one, please. Okay, school choice is very much alive, actively working, thus it must be preserved. That's one of the main midterm campaign lies you will ever see. And Suzanne, would you address that just a little bit?
That is false for sure.
Yeah.
That is absolutely false. You have a lot of candidates down. That's what their platform is, because this has become such a big issue, and you're hearing Republicans. They'll put it on their platform, or you'll hear independents that yes, we want school choice. In fact, I saw on I forgot what platform it was on, but Ted Cruz had put out
Mhm.
a tweet that he was very much, yes, school choice is it. And I'm like, no, because school choice, uh, this is also tied to the parental Bill of Rights that states are bringing up. So we'll discuss that later, but all of this
Right.
is kind of tied in together.
Yes, it
Do that.
absolutely is. All right. School choice means my local school board is free to do what myself and other parents in my district want. We'd like this one to be true. We really,
It's
really would, but
false.
it's not. No. And in your local school board is usually dictated what moves they can and cannot make, not so much by the politicians, the public-private partnerships, as well as your accreditation bodies over your particular schools. Now, we need to understand that a lot of states, their homeschool departments, they may have homeschool departments, they may not, that are supposed to protect them. Uh, because homeschoolers have to use nationally normed tests, that's where it starts to impact them as well. So we need to be very careful with these assessments and these accreditation bodies. Okay. School choice means my local taxes stay local and go right to my school board.
False.
How so?
That is because when you're talking about school choice, you're talking about the if your child is not going to go to a public school, but is going to go to a private school or a parochial school or any other type of school, your tax money is to follow that child. So your taxes are really not staying local, they're going to go regional when this
Yeah.
happens, because you've got this big umbrella that you will have the regional school board. Because remember, the school board, when you have school choice, when you take them out of that government institution, then and they're going to other schools, well, that school board does not have control anymore. So the solution, they always give you the problem, and they give you, wait for you to respond, and they give you the solution. Oh, well, the school board is not covering all the schools, so we need to have a regional board that does that. And in fact, Louisiana, there's a parish in Louisiana who is doing just exactly that.
Yeah, and it means money follows the child. And what we
Mhm.
need to understand is that when you have the money follow the child, that is a business model of pay for success, which does not work in education. But it also sets up a more sinister plan, and that is the data tracking, because everything has to be measured by competence now. So we have to be very, very careful when we hear money following the child. All right, my local tax money means the power of my vote is preserved. As such, my school board is secured. Now, we want to point out this is not related to the poll taxation that used to exist in America. So, Suzanne, what do we have for this one?
That's false.
Okay, because taxation is tied to my vote
Mhm.
because of the First Amendment. And
That's
we'll
right.
get into that in just a few minutes. Okay, so let's go to our next one, and this should be our last one. There we go. All right. Elections nationally or locally impact my taxes, especially via policies. Now, we need to point out here, laws and policies are not interchangeable. They are not the same. Law is the framework. Policy is an interpretation of the law. But again, depending on what agenda the interpreting body has as to what policy will be set. And what we're seeing is that some pretty awful policy think tanks are setting out ideas and initiatives that everyone is just going, you've got to be kidding me, but they're passing it off as, well, it says so here in the law. Okay.
Yep.
Next one. I'm totally supportive of the largest chunk of my taxes on everything to go to education. Now, we need to understand this is one of the largest taxpayer abusive systems in our country. If we were doing this to each other, we could be charged with theft, but yet our government does it on a daily basis and in the name of student success. So, Suzanne, would you close us out, please?
I'm sorry, what?
Would you close us out on the true and false?
Oh, okay. Oh, yeah, that one would be false.
That's right, because we shouldn't be supportive, because this type of taxation was not constitutionally bound at all, was it?
No, it was not.
No. Okay. So, do our commentators have anything before we move on?
I'm going to pull up the chat and see how everybody's been doing. How did everybody do?
Yeah. How did you do on this?
How did you do? Everybody, I could see. I pulled up the chat so I could see you to see how
Okay.
everybody did.
Okay.
And if you did good, just thumbs up. If you did okay, just say
Yep.
okay.
Yep.
So, oh,
Lori got a
yay,
thumbs up.
Lori.
Cool.
All right. Yay. Bill did okay. Fantastic.
Yeah.
So y'all have been
Okay.
listening. Y'all been paying attention.
Very good. So what we
Yes.
tried to do was, if you had more than 2 truths, we knew, okay, there's some homework that you need to do. And if you had more than 5 falses, then there was some homework that you needed to do as well. And that's okay. We're going to have lots of resources for you. All right, Suzanne, let's move on, please.
Yes.
We don't want to get bogged down because we
That's
do
right.
have so much to go.
Yes.
Okay. Current federal legislation. Okay, before I get too knee deep into this, let me tell you now. Tim and I did a show on this one, and this one is a current legislative bill on the national level that would impact your state. It's called the Open Schools Act, which is HR 6380. This is the one that Tim and I did, where your family would be incentivized for school choice, Suzanne, to the tune of $10,000 per family.
Oh, can I go ahead and collect that $10,000 because I want to
Exactly.
spend it on a new TV?
Now here was the thing. When Tim and I did the show on this, he was like, "Oh, goody! What family couldn't use $10,000?"
Mm-hmm.
Now, what we noticed was that they give you the amount and then they dictate to you how you will spend it. So, answer me this, commentators or audience: how can that be a free, true school choice if you're taking government money and then they turn around and tell you how to spend it? And this does include homeschool resources.
It can't be.
That's right. It can't be.
It can't be. That is on
That's
page
right.
7 of this bill. It tells you where the money can be spent. And this is where you can see the school choice illusion in plain sight. Okay, so it tells you here, you can use it to pay tuitions and fees for private elementary school or private secondary school. You can pay the cost of attending a public elementary school. Now, wait a minute. Don't our taxes already go to fund public education under the guise of it's free?
Yes.
So why would I need this? Okay, anyway, now remember, this is all in the name of COVID relief. That's why. So this is one of the reasons why school choice is such a hot topic in our midterms, is because it's somehow promising a relief from all the garbage that COVID has caused with education. All right, private tutoring, learning pods, micro schools, we've covered those. Those are public-private partnership inspired. They are not grassroots effort at inspired at all. You might have some that do come up with grassroots, but they're not true solutions. And we've gone over that on our Rotten to the Core shows as well. And then number 4, for your homeschool expenses, to purchase educational materials, including instruction materials and textbooks. Well, with everything going to artificial intelligence, why would you need to point out textbooks? Think about it. All right. For other such purposes as the secretary deems appropriate. All right, ladies and gentlemen, anytime you see a phrase like that in an education bill, be it state or be it local, federal, you're giving your power right there to the person named who deems it appropriate. That takes the power from the parents.
All right.
Right.
So even though
There we
you might
go.
get that $10,000,
That's
you're
right.
not going to
As
be
long
able
as
to
you get
spend
that
it on anything you
$10,000.
want.
Okay. So that's just one of the examples of the current federal legislation in favor of school choice. We also have several federal parental rights bills laying out what parents can and can't do when it comes to education. And as Tim pointed out to us, scripture tells us the polar opposite. Okay. Now we need to understand school choice false narrative is not new. In fact, we have a document we're going to be showing you that was the research guide that marries to the Goals 2000 that was published in 1994. It's almost 800 pages. And in those 800 pages, it will give you how school choice was cooked up by a public-private partnership involving the White House and big business. Okay? Now, because we have so many officials and so many states who sacrifice their 9th and 10th Amendment sovereignty to take federal money in the first place, and not just for education, this is why we're in this state that we're in. And when I say state, I mean with a capital S, okay? Amendments for sovereignty in not accepting federal funds for education in any form, state and local levels misrepresent our school choice too. They absolutely do. Now, it tells you here, one of the most current assaults on the false narrative excuse me, assaults on the parents with a false narrative were during the 80s called the voucher system. And that is in a book called A Place Called School. Now, I'm going to show you, this is the book. And this was one that Charlotte Iserbyt said was one of the most god-awful, toxic books she ever got to lay her hands on. His report was at the Department of Education. She found it in a bin that someone was going to throw out. She said, no, I need to read it. It is very scathing because it tells you how the globalization of the American education system and what we're seeing today. It was published in 1984. Here we are in 2022, and it is very much in our faces. Okay. All right. So I want you to envision a lock. Now, the lock represents where the money is. And right now, or the way it used to be, or the illusion that it's giving, is that only the school can get that money for whatever funding it needs, for whatever program, resource, or curriculum. What school choice is giving you the illusion for is, okay, we're going to take the key and we're going to take it out of the school system's hand and we're going to place it in the parent's hand. And what you don't realize is, even though you may now have the key, every access to your curriculum, your assessments, your special services, like for special needs, any of those after school programs, any of those things that can be somehow contrived to be related to education, haven't changed their location. You're the only one who's changed your location. So you're going to put them right back in the same corrupt system under the guise that you're somehow exercising a free choice.
It's an illusion of choice. It's not
It absolutely
the true
is.
choice.
It absolutely is. This doesn't change anything. Now, I got this from I got the idea for this particular lock through the state of New York's website on education, because they were trying to snow parents on how vital it was that they not only pay their property taxes, but how much they had to fund the school board. Because after all, if they fund the school board, their child will somehow be better off than if they don't.
Wow. That's New York.
Well, it's all over the nation.
But it's
not just New
everywhere
York.
now.
Yeah, it
Yeah.
absolutely is. Okay, so From Schooling for a Global Age, and this is another one that Charlotte suggested. She tells you here that this particular book is also one of those that you need to understand, especially where UNESCO is coming in. And on page 77, it will tell you that the UNESCO adopted the recommendation concerning education for international understanding, cooperation, peace, education, as it relates to human rights and our fundamental freedoms, not as God created, not as our nation laid out, but as the United Nations dictated in their Declaration of Human Rights.
Now, I want to say one thing
Yes.
about this. You have to watch out for that word, fundamental. You're seeing it in all the Parents' Bill of Rights that the states are putting out. You're seeing it in the federal one that Josh Hawley drew up and is now trying to get through the process. But rights come from God, so they're not fundamental. They're God-given, unalienable. But when they change that fundamental, it changes the entire meaning of it. So you lose God-given, unalienable, then it becomes fundamental, where government dictates the
Right. Let me read you real quick. This is what the UN fundamentals, and this is what we're seeing. You notice social justice. You notice all the things that we're seeing going on. Well, this was the root of it. It's because of that UNESCO agreement. And let's not forget that in 2004, Bill Gates signed a global agreement with UNESCO to create a one world curriculum for these express purposes, an international dimension and a global perspective in education at all levels, meaning all ages, and in all forms, meaning in every informal and formal way to learn. Understanding and respect for all peoples, their cultural civilizations, values, and ways of life, including domestic ethnic cultures and cultures of other nations. Okay, the social and emotional learning that we've talked about so much. about how it changes your attitudes, values, and beliefs. This is absolutely roped in, and it is roped into our school choice as well. Okay. Let's see.
And
The
too, Lynn, when we
ability.
did our introduction, we talked
Mhm.
about the Chamber of Commerce, how
Oh,
they
yeah.
are tied into this with their goals. So
Yeah.
if you didn't catch the introduction to this, which was on voting rights, we went over that and how
Hmm.
this was going to affect the voting rights. That is available on our platforms Rumble, BitChute, YouTube, Brighteon, and you can also find it on Sons of Liberty Media with all the resources intact there.
Okay. Here are some big ones. Okay. Now this will tie in with voting.
Hmm.
Awareness not only of the rights, but also the duties incumbent upon individuals, social groups, and nations toward each other, and understanding the necessity for international solidarity and cooperation. Solidarity is a communistic word, if I don't, if I remember right. Is that not correct?
That is true. That's what we've heard it
Okay. All right.
used
Okay.
with.
And in a communist system, you might could vote, but is that really your voice? And are you really going to see your voice and your vote go to change for we the people? No, you're going to see it prop up the status quo. Okay. From the NEA, Trojan Horse in American Education, this is the one that Sam Blumenthal wrote. Charlotte also recommended this one. Robert Owen on page 10, he's the father of socialism. He's tied into education as well because he came to America and said that the society and not the parents were the better educators. Okay. NEA is one of the largest unions. Let me point out here that it's also the American Federation for Teachers. Both of these huge unions are in bed through the International Teachers Union with the United Nations to bring about this particular school choice narrative that, oh, yes, you're going to get so much more bang for your buck if you let the parents decide. But what they are doing, and if you read Sam's book through and through, you will see they're not after changing education. They are after eroding our government, especially through our representative form.
Exactly. Exactly.
Okay. Because in this system, the state is everything. Now, this brings us to the tie back to UNESCO. And don't look so much at the orange box. What I want you to do is I want you to remember when Senator Lamar Alexander was in office, one of the things he loved to throw around, especially before the Every Student Succeeds Act was put into law form. Oh, this is going to get rid of the national school boards, the national curriculum, the national school boards. He kept going back and forth about this. Now, he wasn't exactly lying when he said there was a national school board. What he didn't tell you, though, was that because of all this union between the NEA, the AFT, the International, the UNESCO, and all this, was that UNESCO is often referred to as a school board for the world. And that's what we're seeing play out through our sustainable development goals. Okay, so look at it this way. Article 1 of our Constitution laid out our elections, thus our representation. In Article 4, the Constitution backed that up and also said, citizens, you have privileges and guarantees for security and safety. Other amendments that secure our rights are the 9th, which assigned other state rights. 10 gave the power by the people, that was brought up earlier, and the 14 state restrictions of what the state can and can't do to you. And then number 26, where 18 was the youngest to vote. Now, let me throw in very quickly, HR 1, the For the People. There is a caveat in that would take a federal legislation bill, if it's turned into law, to overturn the 18 and lower it to 16, because in the social justice global solidarity, the younger you get the people to vote, the better your society will be. And Suzanne,
Wow.
if you'll finish this slide up for us, please.
Okay, it says these privileges and guarantees have been violated by unconstitutional federal agencies and their activities to coerce the states and parents. And that is so, we see that all the time.
Mm-hmm.
Education, labor, jobs, health care were not among the privileges to be secured for us. But what have we seen come in there? Obamacare. We are now seeing mandates on health care. They're just changing the, and it's policy, it's not law, because they do not have authority over that. Um, and these were to be secured by us, the people. But, you know, it's not. So school choice funding is bad. And why is that? It's subsidized. Therefore, you don't have a voice. Just
Right.
like health care. Remember when Obamacare came in, that was health care insurance that was subsidized. Well, now we're seeing what the result of that is you don't have a voice anymore. You are
But wait
not
a
an
minute, wait a
active
minute, wait a
participant.
minute. Didn't Trump get rid of Obamacare?
No, no, no. Trump only got rid of the individual mandate,
Right,
just the individual mandate.
right.
The legislation of Obamacare is still in
It
place. So
is.
all those,
It
that big
absolutely
old,
is.
I want to say monstrosity of garbage is
Mm-hmm.
still intact. And that's what it
Mm-hmm.
is. It's just garbage.
Okay.
Um,
So let's
yeah.
move on. Okay. All right. From School World Order. Now, if you've not met John, as he likes to be called, Jake, he's the one who wrote this. And this was all about the technocratic globalization for American education. Now, Tim and I've had him on a couple of times. And one of the things that Jake did was tell us, among all the guilty parties that are doing this to our families and trying to divide us, is IBM. Now, IBM was also one of the ones that came up with the thing of, oh, yeah, school choice is a good thing. School choice is going to give the parents so much power because we're going to incentivize them. We're going to give them money. Well, think about it. IBM is the same company who used their data to kill millions of people in concentration camps during the Nazi uh, uh, part of history, as well as millions of people in the South Africa apartheid. So, how much should we really be looking to IBM? But yet, they were one of the ones who were in on this deception from the get go.
Hmm.
Okay.
Now, we're almost halfway through the slides. Does
Yes.
anyone have any questions? Okay, I think we're all
All right.
good.
So, from Jake's book, the key to understanding that school choice is a planned lie and a manipulation tool to destroy voting. Charlotte wrote a scathing introduction to his book, and this is where she laid out that school choice would use charter schools to deceive you because they're somehow better than the public alternative. But what we're seeing is that a lot of these charter schools are using federal funding and state funding, telling you it's free. But again, their curriculum, their resources, their assessments are all the same thing. And then it goes on to move to your other types of schools, such as other private schools, parochial schools, and even home schools. And as Charlotte put it, it was the hug without the squeeze.
Now,
Okay.
Tim, I wanted to ask you because I know um, now this is not even biblical at all, as far as I understand. Is it with the government doing all of this? That is not biblical at all, and it's not certainly not constitutional.
Yeah, no, again, you go back to the parents. I was when we first started off. I was thinking of Daniel, for instance. He's a young man, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. They're probably teenage boys at the time, or young men. They would be assumed. And when they go into Babylon, now Babylon has this very strict, um, you know, discipline and teaching of what they're going to do. And we see in chapter one of the first things that they do is because they wanted to honor God because they were doing what mom and dad had taught them to do in Deuteronomy 6. We see there that they wouldn't defile themselves with the king's meat and his wine and such. And they should give us water and lentils to eat. And, it wasn't just expressed in their appearance, but the Bible goes on and it says in verse 17 in Daniel 1, it says, and as for these four children, that's Daniel, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, God gave them knowledge and skill and all learning and wisdom, and Daniel had understanding in all dreams or visions and dreams. And so, God blessed them in that way. Why? Well, it's obvious. Their parents had taught them the law of God. And so as they were honoring God, God was honoring them. It really had nothing to do with the state. In fact, the state that was trying to impose its indoctrination on them was sort of astounded of how God had blessed them from learning his law.
Perfect.
Hmm. Okay. Place called school. We have a lot of what I call the Common Core Machine members help contribute to that particular book. And that particular book was another one that Charlotte was like, look, if you really want to be chilled to the bone about what is happening to America, this is a book to read. A lot of these are also technocrats or either progressive socialists. A lot of them will prop up school choice. And of course, you could see the page numbers there, 10 and 91, where school choice vouchers are being used, and they're going to tie it to mastery-based or outcome-based education. And what we need to understand is anytime your government, be it local, state, or federal, starts using outcome in relation to people, especially where education is, it means that there's a preconceived slot you are supposed to fit in, not a free choice of where God wants you to be. Okay. So this also tells you that the vouchers are going to be used for skill-based training, not necessarily academics. And we're seeing that happen now. Now, in the end of work, this is the last book that we're going to show you. Okay. This was one that is describing the shift from in-person work to totally online work. Now, he also goes on to tell you in this particular book that a lot of the way this is going to be done is through tax reform laws that will impact our economy. And if you look at the portion of taxation that goes for education, you're going to turn this republic on its head by doing something like this. Now, reformed economy under this model defaults to altering how you vote, because again, in this book, it tells you that when the government shifts to total tyrannical control, voting will not need to happen, because there's no need for it, because it will be all chosen for you. Everything will be done for you and you'll be happy about it. And we've heard similar rhetoric just come out of the World Economic Forum. Okay. Now, this is also meaning that your representation is going to be altered because it relies on taxes as per our Constitution. All right. So we have to continue the socialized slide. In other words, no educational freedom if we're going to continue on with believing that school choice is going to give you something that you've never had before. Okay, now this particular research manual, and Suzanne, this will be one of the resources that folks get. Is that correct?
I do believe I have the link for that.
Yes. Okay. This is the one that is almost 800 pages. It was published in 1994, and it was to lay out for you the horrible agenda to turn education in America from for the people to against the people. Okay. So it lays out for you how the educational system is demised. And let me tell you real quick, the next one is not a real good image, but I can tell you that you can find this when you get your particular copy of the download and take your time going through it. Here are the 9 basic facts. Restructure American education. Have it mirror the UN socialism agenda. Create it so that it is all outcome-based, career tech or STEM. Now, those particular words are not used. This is an updated version because remember, this was 94. Okay. The outcome-based education hasn't changed. It's just gotten new names. Okay. Number 4, and this is where the arrow is. Vouchers, tax credits, and education savings accounts are not grassroots, but rather public-private partnerships between the United States Department of Education and the New American School Development Corporation. Now, if you look back at who the New American School Development Corporation was, it was headed by Xerox and IBM, as well as, are you ready? The Rand Corporation, Carnegie Foundation, Goldman Sachs, the Knight Foundation, the Ford Foundation, Prudential Insurance, the United Parcel Service Foundation. In other words, you've got big business that's now running education, and every one of these is in the Business Roundtable, and Business Roundtable fully endorsed Common Core as the national curriculum when it was rolled out. Okay, so The goal of these particular credits and tools, credits and vouchers, is a joint effort to privatize all school choices, merge them into public, thus creating a federal top-down control you cannot escape. And remember, it's not just K through 12, it is cradle to grave.
Exactly. And that
Now, before you get into resources, Suzanne,
Yeah.
let me share a couple of other things, okay?
do we
the
want to
Bush-
show do we want to show our little split America?
Yes, we do. We want to show that right now. Okay. Because during the Bush administration, it was catalyst for forming this New American School Development Corporation, corporation. You can find that on page 308. They have now updated to become known as the NAS. And what we're seeing is that our nation has not stayed as free as it could, because we have morphed into just two political parties, when our founding fathers told us that would be our death knell, is if we only had two political parties. But we're seeing both sides of the aisle prop up this school choice, these vouchers, these tax credits, because it's all free and it's all available. Now, Chester Finn was George Bush's education architect. And if you look at Finn's platform, it was totally to privatize all education, to break the mold for public, for student outcomes. Okay. This was embedded in the No Child Left Behind. And everyone needs to understand, the No Child Left Behind was not done away with the Every Student Succeeds Act. It was codified. Everything that had been a federal overreach in education was codified in that Every Student Succeeds Act, as well as bring in new programs and initiatives that had been failed experiments, but were now somehow okay to pull in. And school vouchers and school choice was one of them. Okay.
All right.
The agenda will tie back to John Dewey and his particular outcome-based genre. And this dovetails into Clinton's initiative, School to Work. So it doesn't matter if your guy was an R or a D. This thing has marched on through every single administration. Now, the popular concept, and this is from this research guide, the popular concept of choice means that federal money will eliminate private, parochial, and homeschooling. These will merge with public education for a national school system, a national curriculum, governed by national appointed leaders. So every bit of your representative government from local up has now disappeared. Okay. Charters will be merged into public education as well. All right. Also, in this research guide, you're going to see where education will intrude into our homes to monitor the families, because everyone is at risk. Well, what has COVID done? Put everyone at risk. What is the government doing? Coming into the home, telling you how you can raise your child, how you can educate your child, all in the name of either at risk or school readiness. Restructuring lumps education and labor to merge and creates lifelong learning and credentials, or a work passport. You can find that on page 394. And what did Trump and Betsy DeVos do at the G20 in South America? They signed an agreement to unofficially merge education and labor, not only in the United States, but across the globe. Okay. This all will link to the New World Order and by default kill your voting and representation. This also will restructure and destroy the U.S. sovereignty that we have seen. And lastly, this restructuring of education will mirror the former Soviet Union with its caste system, which Ronald Reagan ushered in with Soviet agreements on education and technology.
Yay.
So
Not really. It's not a great
Yeah.
thing at all. It's
I
bad.
know it really
but
isn't, but
people
that
are
is
yelling. I'm just amazing how people are just like, yeah, we're getting school choice, yay, and they're
Yeah.
so happy, and they don't
Yeah.
realize it's really going to be the demise of their.
Well, now the
voting.
rest of the slides that we have for you are resources that we will make available after the webinar. I'm really interested to hear what our panel has to say in response.
Yes, and I want to show some of these that we have pulled up.
Okay,
Let's
sure.
remind everybody to check any kind of bills on education, congress.gov.
That's
You
my
type
go-to.
in right here, education, and it will pull up everything that you see on that they have in education. This is
Deliberate
Charlotte's
dumbing.
site,
Mhm.
deliberatelydumbingdown.com. Plethora of information. You can go and hit the little search function.
Oh, Suzanne, while you're
Yes,
showing them, why don't you show them how we got some of our information off
sure.
of Charlotte's? We typed in voting rights, and ladies and gentlemen, if you think what we've brought to you is just made up, a lot
Here
of
it
what
is.
we got was
It was
from
right in
Charlotte,
here.
and she had already done the legwork, which was why she said, school choice was going to kill representative government. So that's where a lot of our resources came from. We also have the American Decept. Is it what is it? The American. Mhm.
AmericanDeception.com. That is
Yep.
the sister site to
Mhm.
deliberatelydumbingdown.com. And like I said, all of this you will get in the email with
Mhm.
links. That way you don't have to go try to type them in. I will make sure you have links to all of this to make it
As well as the
easily
books.
accessible, as well as the books.
Mhm.
Absolutely. You will have
Absolutely.
the links that you could just click and get
Mhm.
all of this.
All right.
And of course, this is Lynn's site.
Yep,
It's
that's my
Cardiva.
site. Very good.
And
And
of
so
course,
thank you
you
for
use the
everyone
search
who's
function.
visited there.
Yep. And
Okay. All
then
right.
this is a video and article that I did for Sons of
Mm-hmm.
Liberty Media. A really bad idea. States and feds establishing parents' Bill of Rights. And it covered the 7 states now that
Mm-hmm.
have done this. Texas that's what Governor Abbott is focusing on for his reelection is parent rights. But you've got to go and take a look at the video and look at the resources. A lot of the explanations of why this is not good came from our own Publius Hulda, who's done immense of research on this.
Right.
And so
Right. Well,
then you've got,
let me point out one thing real quick
sure,
before we move on. Okay. You were talking about someone's using it for their platform to get reelected.
yeah, that would be Greg Abbott.
One of the resources, and I think I shared it with you separately, and I think we did it on our precursor,
We
was
may have.
talking about how the GOP is mad as all get out that they lost the majority, and so one of their ways that they're going to get it back in 2024 is they're going to champion school choice
Mhm.
and parental rights as their ticket to gain the majority. Now, ladies and gentlemen, we already see that our political parties are so united in agenda that what you'll see with a move like this is to further divide we the people. Because who in their right mind would sit there and tell you, well, no, parents don't need to have a right. No, we need to have school choice. Do you see what they're doing? They're having us set ourselves up to fight each other so that they can continue their unibrow agenda.
Exactly. And then, of course, you went over this how Americans are being deceived by school choice.
Mm-hmm.
This was the morning show. This was back in January that
Mm-hmm.
you and Tim did.
Yeah, that
And
was on that HR
six
6380.
three eight
Yes.
zero.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, it was.
Yeah, that was absolutely that one.
And
And
then
that
you
is
are
one
paying
you,
for you and your kids to be tracked and traced. That's another bad
yeah,
thing that's coming out of the school choice is
yeah,
data mining, tracking, violation of your rights.
right,
And this,
absolutely.
and if people don't know, this is sonsoflibertymedia.com where you can find me, you can find Lynn, you can
And
find
Tim
Tim
and
and
Bradley.
Bradley. A plethora of us are there.
Yes,
And
absolutely.
yes, and then
Okay.
you can find me on Brighteon.com. This is my video site, Hammer It Out. And then I believe that concludes the
It
presentation.
does, and
I will,
we have our guest commentators that we would
yes, we
love for
do.
them to, especially our tactical civics guys, because now that we've laid this platform, they said they had some solutions. So we are
Yes.
really anxious to hear about this.
So which one wants to start? Um,
Yeah, uh,
okay,
I can, start.
okay.
This is a lot of content that y'all put into this discussion, and it goes to show you, to prove that what we've been told is wrong, and so many different levels. Um,
Matt, you might want to say your name first and
Yep.
clarify who you are.
Let's do that. Let's start with that. David, why don't you start first since you're the founder?
Well, that's fine. I mean, either of us. I'm David Zuniga. I'm the founder of America Again Trust and Tactical Civics. Matt Maida, whom you're going to hear from also, just heard from right now, is my co-founder. Um, what you all have been talking about, we homeschooled and our daughter is homeschooling her 6. And so far, they're all saying that the children, my grandchildren, are saying that they're going to homeschool their children, and they can't imagine institutionalizing their children when they have any. So I believe, I mean, it sounds simplistic. It's actually very hard to do. Any of you homeschoolers know this. Certainly Tim knows this. The answer to all the education evil is take your children home. Now, I went beyond that. I took my money home. For 28 years, I've been a law-abiding non-taxpayer. For 16 years, I've maintained a website called a Tax Honesty Primer. It's just taxhonestyprimer.com. And I turned that into a book a few years ago. It's available for $3.99 at Amazon. It's called A Tax Honesty Primer. In that book, I show you how over the first 12 years after I stopped filing stuff and paying Congress terror organization, they confronted me over those 12 years. They confronted me 14 times. I sent certified mail, and I sent them certified mail responses back, and they all pounded sand 14 times out of 14. And I mean, I had regional directors that pounded sand. They had no answers to, I just put everything right back on them. I showed them, I know the tax code. I've read the entire thing. And you don't, I'm obeying it and you're not. Now, show me where I am breaking the law. Anyway, I went up against them 14 times and they couldn't land one hit on me. So I've been, after that 16 years, I haven't heard a word from them. And I show people in the book, A Tax Honesty Primer, look, if you're talking about all the bad things that government is doing, and I can show you that Congress is right now collecting 5 times the amount of money required for the 17 functions that we give it in the Constitution, why in the world would you send them more money? And if you're a Christian and you believe that, causes have effects and if we do bad things, we're going to pay for it. Look, bring your children home. Keep everything you earn. Don't send money to Congress right now. They don't need it, number one. And number two, it's illegal the way they're collecting it. Now, not all taxes are illegal, and I'm not saying that no one owes a tax. Read A Tax Honesty Primer. It's only $3.99. I'll send you a free one if you ask me. But it's crazy what we're doing. We are paying for our own demise. We are sending our own children to institutions where they are destroying them. So that's number one. But after realizing, tax honesty isn't going to do it. It's not a solution. It's not a complete solution because most Americans are too afraid. They will not stop paying taxes. They will not stop filing. They just won't. You can show them fact after fact after, and that's all my book is. I pull law out and I show you from the tax code, from statute, from cases, federal cases. I show you what the truth is. That's why they've never been able to do anything to me. I don't tell lies, and I don't, disobey the law. I obey the law and I tell the truth, and that's the safest way to just, hey, I don't owe a tax. Most Americans don't owe a tax and never have, but they don't know it because they're afraid of learning this stuff. So I made the book very small and I say, look, if you want to learn how to do it, here it is. If you don't want to do it, great. You go, hang yourself. Go keep paying for your own demise. Okay, so that's number one. But we have a positive chore to do with our lives for the rest of our lives. We have to repent. America Again Trust, which is the mothership to Tactical Civics, which is the action mission, is all based, it's predicated on the lordship of Jesus Christ, on him crucified and having renewed all mankind for all time. Not only us, but I'm sure, wherever creatures live everywhere in the universe, they're his. Everything is his. He is king over everything that is. All right. So if you really believe that, then you have to live like it. When you learn a truth that's hard and that's painful, you still have to stand with it. Now, Tim Brown is he's a living case in point. I don't know you ladies, but I know Tim, known him for years. He's been a friend of America Again Trust for many years and of Tactical Civics since we started. So if you live what you believe, there's no problem today that can't be solved because the Lord he's beyond it already. What we're seeing right now is the judgment of God. I know it's all bad, and I know it's hard to listen to and to watch and everything. It's the judgment of God. So I asked, after tax honesty turned out to not be enough, 13 and a half years ago, I was living in an RV, building a home here in the Texas Hill Country, and I was living by myself in a little RV and studying. And I prayed one night, Lord, this country is going to hell in a handbasket. Our republic is falling apart around our ears. How can we stop this? How, Lord? He showed me, he answered that prayer in a very short period, 14 months, 110 books, countless historical documents of the founder. Stuff started pouring in to my computer, to my head. Everywhere I looked were answers, answers, answers. It's amazing. If you ask the Holy Spirit to teach you, he will. And when he does, it's an amazing thing. It will make you weep. It will make you amazed at the power of God. If you ask him, he will give you the wisdom that you're asking for. So Tactical Civics is, I'll let Matt kind of take us over into what it is. Matt runs all of our, he'll tell you what he is. Matt, why don't you just give them a brief overview of what we are?
Sure. Yeah. So I am one of the co-founders of Tactical Civics. Been with the organization since 2010, and we have been at this. David, when he originally had his initial ideas and God spoke to him, we've been at it ever since, trying to really hone the solution. And we've really, last year, from a technical perspective, I'm the IT director for our organization. We launched our new site last January, and since then we've really had tremendous growth, and it's been very good for us. But the main pillars of Tactical Civics and our mission is, first and foremost, God. The Constitution. The Constitution is the law, no matter what anyone says. Irregardless of if our government, our servants are following it, it is the law. That's the second pillar. Then grand jury, and then militia. Those are the four pillars of our mission. And if I'm not sure how you want to handle this, but we can go through and kind of explain to you each component of it in the short term. Probably in about, what do you think, David? Probably 10 minutes or so. We can
probably 10 or 12 minutes. I can start if you want. I'll start. And you and I have done this song and dance enough times. In brief, okay, our republic, the United States of America, is unique in world history. Nothing else like it ever. It's the only society based on the moral principle that we belong to ourselves. And then it's based in turn on the fact that God made us, he gave us life, he recognizes our individual right to make our own decisions and bear the consequences. You gals and Tim, you all say this every day. All right, we have an infographic that we think is very important. It's the hierarchy of American government. And at the top, very large, just like in our Constitution, it says, we the people. And then under that is state grand juries, state militias, and state courts. That's the next level. And then under that is state legislators and federal legislators. And then under that, at the very bottom, is all the, the presidents and all the functionaries of your city, your county, and your state. So at the very top, who's the boss? What does it say in the US Constitution? Who's the boss in our American constitutional system? In the preamble, we clearly indicate, we the people do ordain this government. So we, the people, are ordaining, we are creating through a law. This is the highest law we have. No, we call it the supreme law in Article 6. And in the 10th Amendment, we stipulate that the people retain all the powers that we didn't assign to our servants in the Constitution. Our Constitution was designed to protect that freedom that God has given us. That's what that law is for. That freedom, the system that we built to defend it, and the prosperity that it's allowed us to achieve, those were beacons to this whole world for centuries. People wanted to move here. I don't know if they do anymore, but they certainly did for centuries. All of this, we now see it, as you all talk about every day, we now see it threatened by our own laziness, by our own unfaithfulness to the principles of our founders, by our own unfaithfulness to our God. So that has enabled what you all have just talked about for over an hour. It has enabled powerful interests to corrode our culture, to steal our freedom, and this will continue until we repent. The combination of God's divine providence and hard work by a bunch of us, it wasn't just Matt and I, so far 40, I think there's 47 volunteers that have worked on this team, over 67,000 hours up to today of research and development and due diligence over 13 and a half years, almost 14 years now. We have developed a full spectrum mission to awaken us, to help us repent our dereliction. Hundreds of budding county chapters are now just starting. Most of them are 1 or 2 or 5, or some of them are up to a dozen or even more than that. But most are just a few people learning. They're all learning. We have lots of books. We have lots of material on our training center. If you go to tacticalcivics.com and you click on it, when you go into the training center, you'll see there's a lot there. You stay in the visitor area and you'll get a lot. But again, Matt, you might want to continue to talk about grand jury or anything else you want.
Yeah. So, and you know, our website, we call it a training center, and that's what it is. When folks join, you decide to become a member, you come in and you learn, because we have not been taught basic civics for our country, and that's on purpose, right? The more dumb we are, I think y'all had mentioned before, just the government knows what we need. Just let our servants just say, hey, let us take care of it, right? And so a huge part of our mission is just education, right? And it's not education of just what the problem is, it's what the solution is, right? And so, David just gave you an education lesson there. Who's the boss, right? We the people. And a lot of people, when you ask that question, who's the boss, they understand, they get it. We are the boss. But so if we're the boss, why is this happening, right? How did we get in the situation that we did? And what can we do about it? And one of the short descriptions of our mission that we use sometimes is what Tactical Civics is. When you boil it down to its core, it's constitutional law enforcement, right? The Constitution is the law. They're not following the law. So if you are if you are a person that is breaking the law in your town, say I go in and steal a candy bar from the convenience store, what happens when you break the law? What happens? And stealing candy bar is kind of a mild situation, but when you break the law, there's law enforcement that happens, right? When you commit a serious crime, you suffer the result of our law enforcement that is handling that. So how do you do that with the Constitution? And so those two pillars that I mentioned before, grand jury and militia, were what the founders gave to us for constitutional law enforcement. We just have forgotten how to use them, right? So grand jury, the grand jury is not a institution that it was invented when this country was founded. It's 1,000-year-old institution. We teach that in the training center. What is the history? In fact, we've got a book, David, the title of the book that we just published for grand jury.
Grand Jury Awake. It's the green book.
Right, and you will see that we have a multitude of books, information to back up every statement that we have, every mission component we have. We just about have a book for every item so that you can read more on it and understand. But the grand jury is a 1,000-year-old institution. We inherited it from England. It's part of common law, our common law tradition. It's an important institution stipulated in our Constitution. In modern times, corrupt judges, prosecutors, they've subordinated the grand jury and kept it to themselves, that they control, right? So our mission, first, we educate the people to realize that their power to investigate crimes, even at the federal level, is when seated as a grand jury, and it's essentially unlimited. The power that a grand jury sitting in your county, that power that you have is unlimited. So our network of chapters, our Tactical Civics chapters, will work to pass a grand jury ordinance in every county in the U.S. and allow the grand jury to operate as the U.S. Supreme Court Justice Scalia, if y'all know who he is, said that they must, was, right? He stated it should operate independently of the judge and the prosecutor. So they should never have control. The judge and the prosecutor should never have control of the grand jury. The people should. It's one half of the law enforcement mechanism that the founders gave us. That second half is militia. And I know militia gets a bad rap these days because there's a lot of people that call themselves a militia that are not. In fact, there does not exist a constitutional militia in what we're proposing in the U.S. yet. It will. We will create that. So our Constitution stipulates the militia will execute the laws of the Union, meaning all law enforcement is at the state and local level. It's a state and local responsibility. So what didn't you hear? There's no federal entity that's given law enforcement duty. So no FBI, no ATF. That's not mentioned in the Constitution at all, but the militia is. So states are called upon to appoint militia officers and to provide training, but our state servants persistently shirk their duties, and we're going to change that. So Tactical Civics provides a county militia ordinance in addition to the grand jury ordinance that I mentioned before. That county militia ordinance, it commits local governments to lawfully fulfill militia duties, including assisting grand jury, state and county government law enforcement, emergency response, and other local and state needs. So, the militia will coordinate closely with the local government, except in the roles of the grand jury, if in the latter requires otherwise. So those two pillars, grand jury and militia, county militia, are two significant portions of our solution. David, you want to talk about our first right?
Yeah, let me quickly mention, as to those two ordinances, grand jury ordinance and county militia ordinance, they're both county ordinances. They are enforceable within the county. They are, the county government has the aegis over those laws if they pass them. So our job is to get them to pass them. And one of the things that we have in both the grand jury and the militia ordinance is that the county, on their official website, they will add a page for grand jury, and they will add a page on their website for the militia of the county, showing, okay, here's when the next grand jury will be seated. Do you have anything to report? Do you know of a felony crime, or you think you know of a felony crime that might be in process right now? If you do, you can report it here and remain anonymous. Do you want to sign up to serve on the next grand jury? You sign up here. There are 26 counties in California right now that already have that on their county websites and have had for years. That's where we first saw the idea there. So it's not like this can't be done. It's being done in California, of all places. So the same way with the militia, if they add a page, according to our ordinance, the county will add a page to the county's website for the militia. So if you want to serve on militia, you go to the militia page. It says serve on county militia. Here's when we have our next muster. Here's when we have training. Here's what here's the basic rules for training, or here's the physical requirement, whatever. Everything will be there, so that when people want to now have an actual well-regulated militia like the Second Amendment calls for, they can join. The people who say, I'm not real into these militia groups because I don't know who they are, and I don't know, who's keeping track of them, and they're private. They're just private groups of armed guys. Well, we're trying to get past that. We're trying to go back to what the founding fathers used to do, what the colonial governments used to do. And that's what our ordinances are all about. So our first right is our first coast to coast national project. The original first right, Article the First in the Bill of Rights, in the original Bill of Rights, requiring that congressional districts wouldn't exceed 50,000 people. It's already been ratified by 11 state legislatures. I mean, it was done 230 years ago, but still 11 have already ratified it. And did you know this was the original Article the First, our first right in the Bill of Rights. It is still open before 39 legislatures, and they're not looking at it. So we need to force their nose into it to show them that we want our first right. So all we need is 27 out of the 39 who haven't ratified it yet. And once we get those 27, we will have small districts. And that means U.S. House districts 1/15 the size of what they are today. That means that big cities won't run America anymore. That's a very, very important thing. That's why this was the only item that George Washington actually stood up and spoke in plenary session in Philadelphia in 1787, because small districts are much smaller districts will make it a lot easier for average people to run a campaign. Number one, it'll cost 100th as much as it does today. And number two, it'll cost them a lot less to actually fulfill the role. And if you want to, well, Matt, why don't you tell them about the Bring Congress Home Act? Because that's what this really leads us into.
Right.
David, can I ask just one question? When you're talking
Sure.
about the smaller districts, is that how voting would be protected if we give a smaller district? How does Technical Civics
Well, it
protect
would.
our
I mean,
votes?
if you think about it, today the U.S. House is fairly unapproachable for most people. If you wanted to run for the U.S. House, and let's say you live in Montana that just got another seat after a long time. So Montana now has 2 seats. According to the founding fathers, it should have 21 seats in the House. In other words, all the small towns and the rural areas of Montana ought to be able to speak, but they can't, because there's 2, but they only had 1 up until this year. So one person, well, who do you think the one person was speaking for? Well, whoever's got the money to help them run the campaigns and all. So it always comes down to, go to any state. You go look at any state you want, and you're going to see that money and power go to the people who run these huge campaigns. There's only 535 districts for 343,700,000 people. It's absurd. It's crazy. Right now, why do we have so many representatives at the state level? 7,800. Why? Why do we have 7,800 and 38 or whatever it is, and we only have 435? Because in 1929, we call it the crime of 29. In 1929, the House, without any authority to do it, they passed the quote unquote Permanent Apportion Act of 1929 and said, from now on, the U.S. House is going to be 435 seats, just some random number that they had no power to do it, but they did it. And we let them. Why? Because it was 1929. Remember what happened in 1929?
Stock market crash.
Yeah.
I shouldn't be laughing. People were scrambling for their lives, trying to feed their children, trying to find a way to find a roof to put over their head. So the small districts will make everything, Suzanne, everything different. A different kind of human being, statesmen, stateswomen will start running. Why? Because it'll cost you $15,000 or $20,000 to run a campaign, not 4 or 8 million. So House districts will be small. You can walk across them if they're urban. If they're rural, you can drive across them in, 10 minutes. It's a small, there'll be compact districts. This is why George Washington thought it was so important. If you go read Article 1, Section 2, Clause 4, you'll see 30,000. That's what it says in Article 1, Section 2, Clause 4 of our Constitution. And the reason it's 30,000 is that Nathaniel Gorham was bugging General Washington for days before the last day. You've got to pass this, you've got to pass this, you've got to. And so finally, Washington didn't want to speak in plenary session. Everybody was already thinking he was, this big stud boy. He didn't want to speak, but he finally, on the last hour, the last day, he stood up and spoke about this. And he said, this is the only exceptionable part of this new system. In other words, we take exception to this one thing. It's too large a number, 40,000, because it said 40,000 at the time. So he said that it should be smaller, that they should take this amendment before they broke up and finished. And so they raised the issue that Nathaniel Gorham had wanted to raise, drop it from 40,000 to 30, and it passed unanimously. And George Washington sat down again. So everybody in that hall believed that 30,000 was a safe number. What do you think about 770,000? That's the average district size today.
And many over 1 million, right? Can one
Many
person
over 1 million.
represent over 1 million people? It just unbelievable. That's where we're at today. But
Okay.
the ratification of the original First Amendment is going to change that. And there's did you want to say something else? There's a couple of very cool things that are going to happen when we accomplish that I want to mention. If we got it for a few more minutes.
No, run right into the BCHA. Yeah. That's
so
the
next. This is the people really get excited about this one, our solution, when we hear this, right? So what happens when you reduce the districts to 50,000 people? You go from 435 members of Congress, that's how many we have today, to over 6,400 members of Congress, right? And people react, whoa, we don't need that many more criminals. No, they're not going to be criminals, like David said. They're going to be statesmen, right? Not only that, you can't fit 6,400, congressmen in D.C. Well, that's because D.C. is going to be no more from that point, because we have what we call the Bring Congress Home Act. That's going to be the first thing that passes once we ratify the original First Amendment. What that means is that no longer will Congress work from Washington, D.C. They're going to work from their home district permanently. One thing that COVID has taught us all, you can work from home just fine. Our technology has gotten to the point where it is seamless. So big business does that all the time now. I work from home all the time now as a result of COVID. So if COVID has done nothing else, it has proven the fact that the Bring Congress Home Act will work. So each congressman will work from their home district. We're going to enforce that. Most of our new representatives promised to pass this Bring Congress Home Act as the very first act. So Congress will meet by internet, each member working from just a modest office. They don't need multiple offices to be paid, paying to fly in jets back and forth. Nope. They're just going to have a modest office in their home district under the watchful eye of us, the people that they represent, rather than, when they go to DC, what happens? Lobbyists show up, Let's go out to dinner. Let's go to the ballpark. Everybody knows that happens. This is going to take care of that, right? You can't pay off 6,400 people, right? Especially working from a home district. When your representative shows up in a Lexus, brand new Lexus, hey, where did you get that, right? It's not possible. We'll be watching them. So we'll no longer, they're no longer going to abandon their families and businesses only to get corrupt by DC organized crime. So the House and the Senate will be limited to only 2 terms of office as well. So that is a huge deal. People really get excited about the Bring Congress Home Act.
Well, we will have to wait and see. Well, thank you,
Mhm.
gentlemen.
Yes, thank you.
you so much. Okay.
All right.
Tim, any final comments?
Yeah, well, I'm kind of in the midst, as David said, I've been following him, done a bunch of radio shows with him and a couple with Matt and I think John from their group. And, finally, I think it was last year, and talking with my son-in-law and my boys, we were determined to pick up, and learn. I'm old dog learning new tricks here, so to speak. But putting some of the things in practice they're talking about, civics wise and locally. And so, I let people know that, I'm not wanting to be some guy out there as a lone ranger. And this is where I see some people, they talk with a lot of testosterone for sure. But, mine is always one of, there's wisdom in a multitude of counselors. And so I went to my elder at church, my pastor, and I said, look, I'd like to get our elders on board with this. And then us start, with the simplest of thing of just reading the books that David's done together. I've read, I don't know, probably 5 or 6 of them, I think, myself, but go through them with the guys and kind of have some discussion and do that, once a week or twice a week, however quickly we can get together. And so I got word a couple of weeks ago that they had approved that and that we're going to start doing that. And so I got the PDFs again so that we can do that, and I can have that. They can all have that with them, and they can be reading, and then we'll get together and discuss those things, and then start mapping out a plan for developing this and putting some flesh on it, rather than just it being something we talk about, something we theorize. We're going to put some flesh on it and put it into action and see where it takes us.
Right. Well, I have a question for you, Tim. Since you are in the midst of taking this course and learning so much from David and Matt, and thank you guys so much for all your knowledge, let me ask you, how do you see what you're learning that would help you better protect your family and those around you? Because we're called to not only take care of our families, but to, be the hands and feet of Christ in this mix of school choice and its illusion and the overreach and how it's going to mess with taxation and representation. How do you see that fleshing out?
But I think that, this guy we used to hear several years ago, he had 2 things he said. First, you have to have orthodoxy. You've got to be right in your doctrine or sound in your doctrine. Then you have to have orthopraxy. And you can't have orthopraxy if you don't have orthodoxy. And so, as a man thinketh in his heart, so is he. Or that's his character. That's what he comes out with. So I think a lot of this will end up doing a lot of that, because the one thing that's missing, and I think in a lot of communities now, is maybe use a worldly term here, but a manly fraternity that's godly. And I'm not talking about Freemasonry puts on some clothing of that, but it's really I see it being more the church as it is. If you can decide, if you got people that you're discipling, then by definition you're following the Great Commission. And in part of that, it's building the church, it's building the assembly, and I would say even our community, because we're going to be covenanting together to protect one another. And so when we do that, we're going to be speaking about some of these things like school choice. We're going to be talking probably mostly about, defining what the truth is of the matter. And the truth is what we started out with in Deuteronomy 6. And this is, you young men who aren't married yet, you're doing this in hopes that you're going to one day, God's going to give you a wife, which he says is a good thing, and children. And you're going to want to know what to pass on to them that you're going to learn in this time, hopefully in the group that we're in our county. And the big deal for that to me is teaching them to teach their own kids. Because if you get down there, you don't hack at branches of school choice or school vouchers or, charter schools or any of this other stuff. You cut all that stuff out at the root, and you say,
Amen.
we're taking that out and we're going to put this in.
Yep.
And I think that has a generational approach rather than just, hey, I got to get this done so I can get a job. So I think that's sort of, at least that's my thinking. I'm open to be tweaked on that if I need to be tweaked. But I do think that's really the thing. I see it as a means of discipleship. So
okay, very good. And that's probably maybe the way that we all should be looking at it. But we need to disciple these campaign managers, these candidates, because they are weaving deception where school choice is concerned. And let me go back to that research guide for just a minute, Suzanne, before we start closing out with questions and that sort of thing. Okay. Some of the words of George Bush, and this would be George, who's so infamous for the No Child Left Behind. One of the things that he wanted to do through these tax credits, school vouchers, education savings accounts, and this illusion of parental freedom was he wanted to encourage education excellence, because he thought, well, if the parents can feel like they're choosing, then that's going to drive competition. And competition in America is a great thing because everybody wins. Okay. Not necessarily so, because he went on to say that if the standards, test, report cards, and everything else told you parents what was going on, then the voters likewise would continue it on because their school was doing good. Now, remember, this is not just K through 12 education. This would be secondary, post-secondary education as well. So choice was his leverage. And what happens when you use leverage in the wrong way? You hurt someone, okay? So choice was to include all schools that were publicly funded. And if they weren't publicly funded, get them publicly funded. So let's shift forward to the 2022 midterms. Let's look recently in history where we've seen school choice and ed vouchers and all this garbage come up, okay? Because it's a new incentive. Well, anytime the government says they want to give you money, they call it an incentive. It's a bribe. It's a payout. We'll give you comprehensive choice. And those will give you policies. And this will give you the largest amount of federal aid ever been thrown at education, because the money will follow the child. And that means everybody wins. What they're not telling you is that carries control through data tracking, through slotting you in a case system for skill-based education of what slot you will fill for either the government or big business. All right. We also need to understand that tax dollars tied to these education savings accounts and these vouchers and everything carry federal strings as a de facto rule requirement. We also need to understand that pressure of government is trying to come in to parents to accept this new world order education, because if they don't, then they failed. They failed their children, they failed their family, they failed their community, and they failed their tax duty. Do you see all this? Do you see all this mind manipulation and emotional kidnapping that is tied with all this, Suzanne?
Yes. We talked about that.
Yeah, here's one of the things that we need to also understand. With this system trying to get everything qualified as some sort of publicly funded form of education, thus this national control, you would be known as a lawfully abiding school and have that status. And let's say you have a nonconformist like myself or like Tim or like any of the others that are listening. Well, we would be smoked out because we were the nonconformists. We were the ones who didn't play by the rules, and we would be discredited. And that lends back to the Every Student Succeeds Act, where it said that, All your education had to be the same thing. All your educators, they didn't use the word teachers, they used the word educators on purpose because this was then setting the trap for those outside the public system that they had to be able to be credentialed to teach to this same system. Okay. This would discredit every private, parochial, and homeschool out there because quality is not the goal, control is. So we've already said to watch your accrediting bodies. We also need to understand that the sales pitch around school choice and parental rights. Here we go. Justice for your family, justice for your tax dollar, choice. Because after all, if you don't do what the government says, they're going to make you do it anyway. You'll get a tax break. Oh, seriously, when? Quality will somehow magically improve the educational choice that you've chosen. And if we don't take these education savings accounts and we don't do something, we're going to lose all public education. And oh my goodness, where will Johnny and Susie go? Now, here's the reality. That's the sales pitch going with these campaigns. Okay. Here's the reality. All will become public education under this restructure that was laid out. No control by the parents or local. You'll have a federal dependency. You'll have division among family and neighbors. You'll have school choice as a trap for social change. Suzanne, closing comments.
Yes. Does anybody have any comments? We've talked a lot tonight about a lot of different things. I mean, we gave you a lot of information. We've got a lot more information for you to look at. So does anyone have any questions, final comments before we go to closure? Okay, so I tell you what, we're going to close out, and once we close out, everyone is free to leave. I would like to ask the co-host to please hang on just for a little while, and we'll say goodbye to you after everyone leaves. So we hope.
Oh, we do have a question.
We
when
do,
you talk
okay.
about all this, does it apply to state school choice bills, not just for? Absolutely,
Absolutely,
it does.
yes.
Yes. This is state and federal because this is where the deception is coming. It's coming, if it's not coming from the feds, like through that Open School Act with the $10,000 per family, your state is going to come after it as well. Because what happened when the Every Student Succeeds Act came in and said all education had to be aligned to the same thing? It took the student longitudinal data system from every state, and that tracks homeschools as well as parochial schools, public schools, everything. And it married it to the Workforce Data Quality Initiative, okay? And it merged them together so that that data would flow. So these school choices, parental right bills at the state level are giving an illusion of freedom and power. So absolutely they're at the state level.
Okay, any other questions?
That was a great question.
It was a good question.
Yes.
Very good question.
And if you can't think of your question right now,
That's fine.
Suzanne's going
Email
to
it.
give you a way to get in touch with us so that later, if you have that question, we can do that. So, Suzanne, why don't we start in with our conclusion then?
Okay, I'm going to put my email in the chat for questions and
Sure.
comments after the show. That way they'll have it.
Yeah.
I
Okay.
can't type today. Wonder
Okay.
why.
All right. Well, you're the one who's going first on this one. So,
All right, I hope everyone feels a little more equipped with the evidence and solutions on that you have seen here on a school choice and its real agenda.
and we're honored that we've been able to carry on in part Charlotte Iserbeat's last project that she spoke out about. And let me share with you, the day that she passed was the day that a Connecticut TV radio station aired her interview, where she told without hesitation that school choice was going to absolutely destroy our representative form of government, but it could be stopped if we would work together.
And regardless of loss of local representation or national representation, we all lose. And
Yes,
loss
we
of
all
a
do.
vote is the loss of your voice, especially when you're talking about your child and your child's life.
And the loss of our First Amendment, especially where our elections and votings is concerned in any way, is a step that we cannot allow. We need to encourage others that they cannot allow it either. America's socialism trend has been active for years and will keep going unless we stand in the way.
A complete control of education is a socialistic endeavor where it becomes the word of the state, not the family centered or locally controlled. So we must watch and warn others, especially when we're talking about the upcoming midterm elections and the 2024 elections and races.
Now, as you've learned tonight, everyone, the school choice movement will be one of key division that we will see used supposedly for our children and ourselves, but ultimately will be used against our children and ourselves, and it will remove freedom.
And as Christians, we all know our true freedom is in Christ, not our government. And as Americans, we must stand against tyranny in any form, and we know that. It's kind of inbred in us. So when you receive your archived version of this webinar, you're going to get, like I said, you'll get the slides that we presented to you, and you'll get the list of resources that you will have. And if you would like for Lynn and I, as the Liberty Bells, to come and present this one-of-a-kind school choice reality check to your group, you can email me, and I put my email into the comments section, and that is SuzanneHamner0731@gmail.com, and we'll work together to get that set up.
So everyone, we do thank you for your time and your attention this evening. We know that maybe there was something else maybe you wanted to do, but we thank you that you took the time to do this. We look forward to seeing your dedication and putting into motion all that you've learned tonight by sharing what you've learned, so that you can help others be just as equipped. We want to thank our guest commentators for all their wisdom, their preparation, and their availability to be with us.
And please be sure and join us for our May Saturday night special that will go live on our Facebook channel. It'll be the first Saturday in May. We're
That's
working
May the
on a
6th,
guest.
by the way.
Yes, we're working on a guest, so that'll be a big surprise. And you join us each week on Thursday. 11:30 a.m. is what we have been doing regularly on our broadcast. And you can find me at Sons of Liberty Media, and you can find me also at HamnerItOut@Brighteon.com.
And you can find me on CommonCoreDiva.com, Breaking News Journal TV. You can also find me on Sons of Liberty every Wednesday morning, bright and early with Tim, as we prop each other up for every Rotten to the Core Wednesday. And we just hope that you have a great rest of your evening, and Godspeed, everyone, and good night.